Hey everyone, welcome to Reddit Readout. Today we are checking out ProRevenge. Story 1. Bad boyfriend takes the walk of ultimate shame. From a good friend who lives in South America. Not my story, hers. This happened about 16 years ago. My friend, let's call her Maria, had been dating a guy called Oscar for 2.5 years or so when she found out on the grapevine. If you live in a small town, you'll understand that Oscar had betrayed her. He'd been to a party, got a girl drunk and slept with her. News of his actions had spread as gossip does. The worst part of it was that it seemed that it wasn't the first time that it had happened by a long shot. Well, Maria heard and plotted revenge. She invited him to her flat for a special afternoon of fun with her and her friend Vanessa. Oscar could not resist temptation, so he went. Picture the scene. He goes into the building where she lives, gets into the lift to go up to the 10th floor to get to her apartment. He rings the bell. He can hear music playing from behind the door. She opens the door and he walks in, and sees that both his girlfriend Maria, her friend Vanessa are there, each wearing a sexy silk negligee. Maria is holding a blindfold, and tells him to wear it. He agrees, and she puts it on him and tells him to strip naked. While he was busy, Vanessa put her clothes back on, walked out the apartment, leaving a doorstop to keep the door open, and called the lift. "That's an elevator to you Americans." She then walked back in, grabbed Oscar's clothes, and threw them out the window into the car park below. She then left the apartment and went down the stairs, ringing doorbells as she descended. Maria had been leading Oscar around the apartment, disorienting him, and then led him out the apartment, closed the door behind her and got in the lift alone, calling him an unfaithful asshole whose clothes are in the car park, before the lift doors closed. Oscar ripped off the blindfold, and must have realized how fucked he was, as he had to walk down 10 flights of stairs, buck naked, passing laughing neighbors all the way. He collected his clothes and Maria never saw him again. Edit for clarity, Maria went on the lift alone, and held it open on the ground floor. Neighbors on the 10th floor had come out to see Oscar, setting him to walk down the stairs, thereby making it worse as Vanessa was going down the stairs, alerting as many people as possible. Also people followed him outside, so he had to dress with an audience. The humiliation. TLDR, girl makes unfaithful boyfriend take the ultimate walk of shame, naked past laughing neighbors. Story 2. Take my tips and pay me below minimum wage, see what happens. Apologize in advance for the walls of text, but this has layers. So this all happened years ago when I was still in college. I worked for a delivery joint. The company seemed super cool, because they provided vehicles instead of forcing you to beat down your own car. Huge perk, right? Well, in this case, no. The owner of the company used this as justification to take a percentage of the driver's tips. Often this would result in an employee making below minimum wage. If you made below minimum wage, you would have to come and pick up your check in person and sign a document attesting that you did make minimum wage, due to undocumented cash tips. Or some such nonsense. Now this was a problem for 2 reasons. Number 1, in the state I was in, employee tips belonged to the employee unless part of an employee tip pooling agreement. This was plain as day on the Department of Labor website. So that 20% gouge was already crossing a line. Number 2, you cannot just hand wave and or force employees to say they made above minimum wage. So pretty shady shit, right? Now most people would see this situation and run for the hills, which probably explained the delivery driver turnover being so high. I on the other hand saw the potential. See, I am pretty well versed in labor law, and decided that I was gonna ride it out. I wanted to see how long they would keep this shit up. Here and there I would make. Story 3. Half-brothers threaten to sue me over 16K. It costs them 158K and possibly their parents' marriage. When I, 25F, was 3, my grandparents passed away. They set up a savings account in my name. The account was meant to be accessed by me when I was 21. At that point it contained just over 300k. My grandparents left me a letter saying they would like me to share the money fairly with any other Smith Jones children, meaning my full siblings. Dad's a Smith, Mum's a Jones. By fairly they meant that they wanted me to assess the situation and judge for myself what was fair. I never had full siblings, but I have two half-brothers, Mac and Joe Smith, who are dad and stepmom's kids. Due to the specific wording my grandparents used, I legally never had to give Mac or Joe any money. However, I see Mac and Joe as my brothers, and as the money came from our grandparents, I felt that the fairest thing would be to assign each of us 100k, so we all got an equal-sized lump sum, and I figured that when Mac, the youngest, turned 21 and took his 100k, we could split any remaining money. When I turned 21, Dad suggested I buy a house with my 100k. I found a place I loved but it was 130k and I couldn't get a mortgage, so Dad said I should borrow 30k from the account. I did, figuring I could pay it back before my brothers turned 21, and I have been repaying it. The account should be at 208k right now, but due to me withdrawing and then repaying that money it's at 195k, so I still owe 13k. Joe turned 21 recently, and as I was giving him his 100k, Joe noticed that there was less in the account than there should be. I explained and said I was going to put it all back before Mac, now 19, turns 21. Joe told Mac and both boys said I stole from them and owed them the full 13k back plus 3 grand of interest that they felt they would have gotten, and they wanted it all paid by this summer, which gave me less than 6 months to bring the account up to 211k. I said I'd do it, but over 2 years as planned. The boys then wrote up a contract to that effect. I went to sign it, until I saw that it said 6 months to pay it all back. I wouldn't sign as we agreed on 2 years. They said I should figure it out as they were entitled to that money and would be seeking legal advice. Later that day I got an email, clearly written by them, saying that they intend to sue me for the 16k, plus whatever is currently in the account, and additional damages and emotional distress on top of that. At this point in time, I'd given Joe about 50k of his 100k, because he wanted it in installments. I responded that legally, they were never entitled to any of it, and given their attitudes, I'd say they've already received an amount I deem fair, so that 50k was all they were getting. I then got a barrage of texts, calls, and emails yelling at me for going back on our deal. I blocked them. They then took to social media, saying that I was trying to screw them out of their inheritance and rallying our extended family into harassing me over this, and it mostly worked as a lot of people messaged me. However, I got a message from this guy called Chris Smith. Chris said he was 27, and claimed to be my half-brother. I had never met him before, but he sent me photos of him as a kid with our dad, grandparents, and me. He showed me that he also had an account with 150k in it, and a scan of a letter from our grandparents, saying this money was meant to be shared fairly among Dad's illegitimate children. Chris also told me we have another half-sibling, who is 18. He'd been looking for me for a while, but only found me when Dad shared Joe's post which had me tagged. We checked with a solicitor to make sure, and as the boys are legitimate, they aren't entitled to anything in Chris' illegitimate kid fund, and as they are my half-siblings, they aren't entitled to anything in my Smith Jones kids fund, either. I sent the boys a letter formally telling them to back off, stop posting about me online, and enjoy the 50k because it's all they're getting. The day they received the letter, Chris got a PM from Dad, asking if the boys can have some of Chris' fund. Chris also said no, and told Dad we'd met. I told Mac and Joe about Chris' other half-sibling, with Chris' permission. So it looks like my grandparents, knowing about Chris before they passed, set up 2 funds. One for the kids Dad had with my mother, who was still his wife when they passed, and one for children born out of Dad's affairs, presumably to make sure no one tried to screw anyone else over out of hurt feelings. I'm getting a lot of shit, but holding firm on my decision. The boys have realized that I won't back down on this and it sounds like I've caused a schism at their house, as Joe has all the money and no intention of sharing, so Mac is now feeling twice as screwed, plus stepmom apparently did not know about the other half-siblings, or that my half-sister was born after she and Dad got married, and she's made Dad move into a hotel. It sounds like Dad is looking for a long-term living arrangement outside of the family home, because it looks like she is not letting him move back in. Dad is begging me to reconsider, but honestly I'm done with all of them except Chris and my sister. Story 4. Don't antagonize your lawyer while you're selling your company. Title is a bit dramatic. The revenge is tame compared to what I have read as a lurker so far. But it is the most satisfactory thing I have done so far, given that this happened outside US, where labor laws are, at best, guidelines. I have left out several details. My apologies for formatting/wording if it's unfamiliar to where you are from. Dr. Management threatens their lawyer. The lawyer proves why this is not a great idea. I was an in-house lawyer in a multinational company that sold software. I specifically joined this relatively lesser-known company to learn more about compliance. The company was listed on the stock exchange, meaning more compliance work. I highlighted this specifically as one of the reasons for my seeking out a change. I discovered it was filled with senior citizens, not an age thing, when I joined. Basically a company full of old-timers who are there purely because they're close to the company's owners. As part of the onboarding experience, I had to sit through sermons of how they changed the industry and how they know XX. This meant I had 3 different bosses, one senior guy who was the fixer, I'll call him Senior Guy 1 for convenience, no one really knew what he did, but he got a cabin to himself. Another was an ex-senior management guy who got a gig from the owner to negotiate tech contracts, Senior Guy 2. I highlight this because this ex-senior management guy asked me, "What's a EULA?" Another was my reporting manager, with whom I was expected to work on a day-to-day basis. Senior Guy 3. 1 month after joining, I was told that the company was going private through a sale to another entity. I was shocked. But I had loans to pay, so I continued. For some reason, I was senior enough for them to handle this independently. This meant I worked through nights to complete tasks that a law firm would ordinarily do. I also worked on the definitive agreement that was in use for the company to be sold. This will become important later. By the 3rd month, I had decided the role wasn't what was advertised, and that I was essentially cheap labor for M&A. Buyers were from another city and planned to have their office there. I was not keen on moving. I read between the lines and started lining up interviews. Things went south quickly. Old-timers were unhappy that I was looking for a job because that would mean they're answerable to owners, or worse, have to do the work themselves. Cue the harassment, which really solidified my resolve to leave. All my complaints about Senior Guy 1 and 2 to Senior Guy 3 were met with typical management talk. He sympathized and badmouthed them for burdening the company that he tolerates only because they are closer to the owner. Senior Guy 2 started countering all my remarks. That's all for today. Please don't forget to like and subscribe.